The story begins with our main character, Takeshi Nanase. The tense atmosphere at home causes him to leave, wishing he could be in a place other than at home. While walking to school with his girlfriend, Isoshima Kurumi, she shares her concerns about his tense relationship with Geku, his brother, but Takeshi is unwilling to reconnect. Before entering the dojo, he notices a girl collapse and rushes her to the nurse's office. He can't find any employees to assist him because it's early. The girl bursts into tears and hugs him, referring to him as her brother. She kicks him when she realizes Takeshi isn't her brother and then wonders how she got to school. She collapses again and unintentionally locks lips with Takeshi. This causes her to fire rounds at him before calming down. She then introduces herself as Ava Muyen, as it was an accident. During their conversation, Takeshi observes a crimson butterfly, which Mui promptly shoots. She explains that it is a scout bug, but her brother appears before she can go. He refuses to stop, claiming that he is not her brother. She tries to explain that a group called Ghost Trailer Faction rewrote his memories, but he doesn't believe her. Oigami and Ashwaka enter, addressing her brother as Titsuganashi. Titsuganashi blocks the window with ice magic when they try to flee, so Mui warns him that if he fights her, he may lose his magic. Oigami intends to use his weapon to deal with the situation, but Takeshi, to his surprise, pulls out his wooden sword. They begin clashing blades, but Takeshi is shockingly the first to strike a hit. This causes Oigami to become agitated and damages Takeshi's sword. Takeshi suddenly catches a glimpse of the future and sprints at Oigami's attack, directing his weapon in the direction of their obstructed path. This permits them to flee, and Tsuganashi concludes that Takeshi, like Oigami, is an evasive magician. Mui later says that she is unable to leave Takeshi and apologizes for transforming him into a magician. She reveals that her early shots turned him into a magician, and that her brother became associated with the Ghost Trailer Faction, a group that is unhappy with magicians being treated with contempt in the human world, and how they subsist by concealing their existence from normal people. Right thereafter, Isoshima discovers them, but so do Oigami and Ashwaka, who seek a rematch because they are both elusive magicians capable of evading all sorts of attack. Ashwaka then attempts to rescue Mui, but Isoshima intervenes, which causes him to utilize his magic powers on them. Soon, his powers are sapped since a spell known as the Gift forbids magicians from attacking each other in the human realm. When Isoshima discovers she has been hit, her magical powers are activated, causing her to grow larger. Mui reveals that she has transformation magic, which is a type of corporeal magic. While she panics, Hotter then appears, unconscious and destroyed. He, too, awakens unexpectedly, wielding devastation firepower, and the absurd situation unfolding causes Oigami to charge at Takeshi. Takeshi's magical eyes also activate, allowing him to easily avoid Oigami's moves. Oigami then decides to cripple him, but Mui charges an attack that causes a light scream, allowing Takeshi to successfully land his finishing move. Mui then leads them via a mirror into the ruined realm, a world for magicians. Mui transports them to the Subaru Magical Academy, where Isoshima is being treated. They all go to meet the headmistress, Shiju Mamoka, who introduces herself. She tells that a great magician named Ryu Yusenji Kazuma led the Ghost Trailer group into a full-scale war with an army of like-minded magician factions, including the Wizard Brace and 6 others, in 1999, a year before they were born. Kazuma attempted to wipe off humanity with a spell, but was stopped by 15 magicians who divided the globe in half. As a result, the curse continued to impact solely the ruined world, while the human world was spared. She explains that they can either stay at the academy and learn magic or return to the human world and lose their magic. Takeshi, Ida, and a reluctant Isoshima decide to stay behind in their new class after being assured that the Ghost Trailer Faction will not assault the academy. They are instructed to use aspects to focus their magical powers in order to awaken their ancestral magic. Takeshi, on the other hand, is the only one who lacks an aspect. The teacher then asks Mui to assist him in selecting one from the shop. They encounter Karu in the shop, who assists him in selecting a katana. It turns out that the blade was used by one of the Wizard Brace faction's great magicians and bears a magical circle. Although Mui tells Karu that using the sword may be harmful, he fights Takeshi with full seriousness until the magical circle ignites and begins synchronizing with him. Takeshi, being a rookie magician, has his magic drained before nearly collapsing. Karu hands him several bullets to load into the sword, allowing him to use the magic of others. Everyone in Takeshi's class watches as they fight to manage their magical skills the next day. Meanwhile, Takeshi's human brother, Geku, inquires about his brother's health. He recalls being close to Takeshi until he betrayed him by dating Isoshima. During the confrontation, he was involved in an accident, which he blamed on Takeshi. Mui then visits a fate teller, who tells her where her brother is. She sneaks out of school to look for him again after learning the truth. Isoshima informs the group, who then go to the teacher for assistance. But, because the headmistress is absent, nothing can be done. They sneak behind some seniors and follow them inside the gateway to the devastated planet. They run into the gatekeeper, who asks them to return because Mui did not pass through her box. Isoshima is terrified after witnessing the gruesomeness of the devastated world's magical conflict. Takeshi, on the other hand, continues to lead his pals to hell. Mui runs across her brother, who, as usual, fights her with no memory of her. When he grabs her, she finally triggers a memory of his past. But Tsugunashi is quick to ignore it and renders her comatose. Takeshi confronts him upon his arrival for mistreating his sister. This time, he attacks freely with his ice magic, and even though Takeshi can see into the future, his body couldn't keep up. He constructs an ice cage, but Ida rushes inside to save Takeshi. He then resumes his battle with Tsugunashi, hardly able to stand, while Ida begins to suffocate. Tsugunashi casts his closing spell of Ice Rock, which Takeshi exploits to his advantage and frees Ida. Tsugunashi effortlessly destroys a feeble barrier erected by Takeshi. Takeshi tries to ignite his sword cartridge as a last resort, so Mui and Isoshima shield him from the ice bombardment. Ida throws an upgraded bullet at him, which he loads, transforms into a fire user, and uses the burning sword to melt Tsugunashi's ice and knock him down. As the dust settles, a new foe named Washizuka appears and kidnaps Tsugunashi. At the end of the semester, evasive magic students gather to begin an exam in an interior city produced by illusion magic. They are up against spiders armed with machine weapons. Takeshi discovers Oigami and inquires as to what he desires. Nevertheless, Oigami's memories have been tampered with, and he now acts like any other student, with no recollection of Takeshi. Takeshi is warped away by black magic during the test. As a result, Isoshima is in peril, but Oigami rushes to her help. Isoshima is surprised to see him, but as she explains how they previously battled, he is teleported owing to his injuries. Takeshi and his friends gather and set out for the test's objective. On their route, they come upon a golem, which sends Takeshi flying, and Mui's lightning blast has no effect on it because of its magical improvement. The females start distracting it, and when it attacks, Ida defends them. This enables Takeshi to load his magic bullet, which he then uses to destroy the golem. Meanwhile, it turns out that the disturbance was caused by Violet, the teacher who is secretly assisting the ghost caravan. Takeshi finds Mui has a fever after training and takes her to her dorm. She misidentifies him as her brother and forces him to cuddle her. Regrettably, Isoshima arrives in an unpleasant situation to meet them. She becomes enraged and begins to cry, inadvertently activating her transformation magic, which shrinks her to the size of a toddler. As Mui goes to make Takeshi reunite with Isoshima, he explains that he doesn't want to because they were simply pretending to be together. The headmistress forms a retrieval team for Tsugunashi the next term. Momoka offers an exchange between her group, the Wizard Brace, and the Ghost Trailers upon her arrival at the devastated world. It turns out that Oigami and Hateru were kept alive in order to be traded for Tsugunashi. With Momoka and Washizu separated, the group must tackle Tsugunashi alone. Fortunately, Nanami assists them by creating a water wall to fend off the icicles as he attacks. Two classmates concoct a device to lock him inside a hole, but he escapes and easily knocks them out. Momoka and Washizu are former pals, and she seeks to settle a score with him. When Momoka doesn't flinch when they use advanced magic on each other, Washizu reminds her that his skills allow him to melt everything he gazes upon. They eventually convert to using their weapons and spells at the same time, but both parties can only counter each other. Following that, she concocts a three-way spell so that if he avoids the first two, he falls for the one that drags him into a box that explodes shortly after. He emerges from the river with little to no damage and reveals that he discovered her technique. Meanwhile, Washizu's enchantment gradually begins to harm her as time passes. Momoka casts a spell that begins drawing everything into a black hole when Washizu shares her concern that Kazuma's awakening would bring her secret acts to life. Despite his efforts, he is drawn in just as Momoka is about to be killed by his magic. At the opposite end, the gang arrives at Tsugunashi's ice palace. As Ida tries to open a way, he sets traps in all directions. Ida then delivers Takeshi his fire bullet, but when he loads it, it explodes. When Takeshi goes to collect his sword, his arm becomes frozen along with it. Mui then goes off by herself to confront her brother. She tells him she is lonely without him, but he responds by shooting at her. Takeshi and Anita arrive in a fountain of flames before he can finish her. This time, her words penetrate deep within him, causing him to become bewildered. To detain him, Lily swiftly loads her rifle with a binding bullet. Tsugunashi has returned to his normal self as she awakens. Meanwhile, in the academy, Washizu managed to escape Momoka's black hole. As Tsugunashi's replacements are introduced, he kills them all and reveals that he already has a candidate in mind. Takeshi discovers Mui racing towards a massive pudding in a cloudless sky. She trips and collapses before she reaches it, and Takeshi awakens from his nightmare, scared. He meets Tsugunashi, who informs him that his nightmares may have been induced by magic. The following day, he discovers Mui has damaged her leg. Isoshima explains that she tumbled down the steps while hurrying to collect the puddings. Takeshi collapses as a result of this. Nanami forces him to sleep, and when he does, he experiences dreams of Washizu and a mysterious female. Nanami jolts him awake when she notices his predicament. She explains that his sword, Twilight, is the source of his nightmares, and that it is also using his magical abilities to emerge in human form without his permission. He dreams of Twilight at night while she drains him of his magic in the real world. So the next day, Momoka gives him the choice of letting go of the blade or battling Twilight for dominion in his dreams. He then prepares to sleep while Momoka transports Mui into his dreams. Continuing in his dream, he runs into his mother, followed by Geku, who assaults him. He causes a blizzard with the fallen angel's blade, so Takeshi goes to defend Mui. Shortly thereafter, he comes upon Twilight, who turns her identical sword into the wizard slayer form. This allows her to steal her opponent's abilities, such that when Mui interferes, her barrier is sucked in. She then strikes Mui and drains her magic before moving on to Takeshi. She defeats him and begins stealing his magic. He recalls Momoka's advice while he struggles. He comes up with a solution and then apologizes to Twilight. He decides to rename her Eterna, and she surrenders everything to him. Ida's sister Futaba rejoins him at the academy for the next session. Takeshi is taken aback by Geku's appearance, but he tries to hide it. When they run into each other in the bath a few days later, Takeshi is worried by Geku's scar from the accident and remains silent. Geku then offers to wash Takeshi's back and apologizes for venting his wrath on him. Following that, the brothers reconcile and begin training together. Takeshi is confronted with a nightmare in which he confronts an enraged Geku who vows vengeance on him. He awakens startled, only to discover Washizu beside his window. While Shizu confesses that he merely wants to talk to him, the Wizard Brace faction monopolized magic in the 8th century and colluded with non-magicians to persecute and kill weak magicians. Wizard Brace approached Kazuma because of his talent, but he declined because they simply see him as a tool. Kazuma becomes enraged and kills the official in the office as he threatens him with his parents' safety. His parents were also murdered, and he founded the Ghost Trailers to provide a home for those like him. Washizu also agrees that Kazuma slaughtered a large number of magicians, but he claims that they were all tyrants who deserved it after 1,000 years of oppression. When Kazuma's war began, he attempted to kill a woman named Yako, but she was saved at the last moment. Like Violet anticipated, Yako was the wielder of Twilight and also Takeshi's mother. On June 15th, Kazuma awakens, signaling the start of the second wave of the Wizard War. The next day in class, mayhem breaks out, and they discover a red dragon outdoors. Ghost Trailers members who had infiltrated the school expose themselves and begin attacking everyone on the premises. Geku attacks the teacher from behind, confirming that he is an adversary. Mui is being ganged up on in the corridor as she fends them off. Tsugunashi appears with his ice power to defend her. At Momoka's office, she is challenged by Pendragon, another faction that has joined forces with the Ghost Trailers. They cast their spells by closing the chamber like a vacuum and manipulating the air inside. But this is insufficient to deal with the headmistress. She exposes the flaw in their spells and breaks free fully. She then launches an attack by sucking them into her black hole. Violet then appears, summoning a Valkyrie from her cards. Violet takes possession of the Crimson Dragon as the gigantic Valkyrie attacks Momoka. It simply takes a hit from its tail to bring the combat to a close. Takeshi and Isoshima track down Geku, but his magical eye, Strike Vision, alerts him to the fact that Geku is an adversary. Geku then confesses that he joined the Trailers simply to exact revenge on him. He assaults Takeshi by teleporting into his blind spot, making it difficult for Takeshi to keep up with him. He throws Takeshi down and stabs him from behind, showing his dissatisfaction with his ostensibly elusive magic. Geku becomes serious and activates his blade, greatly increasing his pace. He starts blitzing Takeshi till he can't move an inch. He attempts and succeeds in kidnapping Isoshima, who is only concerned with assisting Takeshi. When Takeshi is comatose, Eterna offers him a vision of the future in which Geku murders their mother. Louis discovers Violet attempting to kidnap Takeshi and attempts to stop her. She is then confronted by one of Violet's summonings, who fights her with a whip. Mui is struck down and about to be executed when she is rescued by an elite trio. Following that, the group's commander announces herself as Kasakena from another faction. She also mentions being Tsugunashi's classmate and ex-girlfriend. Sunita rushes in to protest that his sister was seized by the Magical Bureau since she is thought to have exceptional skills, and Takeshi wakes up in a hospital in the human world. Washes, a person who goes on a murdering spree. He assassinates the magician in charge of the gift spell here. Magicians can now fight in both the human and damaged worlds thanks to the gift gun. The struggle between the Trailers and the 7 main factions quickly throws the world into disarray. Takeshi meets with Yako, attended by Tsugunashi and Kasaki. They ask her to train Takeshi here. She initially declines, but when she discovers the letter's content is a ring, she agrees to the request. It turns out that the ring permits her to briefly employ magic to train Takeshi. Takeshi begins training under his mother's rigorous supervision, but she suffers in secret as the ring drains her life force in exchange for magical powers. Isoshima awakens to find herself looking exactly like Takeshi. As Geku enters, she reverts to her original shape. She is repulsed by his fixation and flees from him. She runs into Ogami in the hallway and begs him to conceal her in his room. Eventually, Ogami and Haruo help Isoshima familiarize herself with the castle so she can make her escape. When they come across Geku, Haru changes Isoshima into her and successfully dupes Geku. Outside, Washes takes Ogami with him, leaving Isoshima to her own devices to navigate the maze-like palace. Meanwhile, Takeshi, Ida, and Ishima arrive at the trailer's headquarters only to be greeted by Ogami and Haru. As Twilight has been taken, Takeshi engages Ogami with a standard sword. He is struck down, but he is able to block a spell. He then constructs a barrier to deflect Ogami's blow. Meanwhile, Haru mounts her steed in her battle against Ida and Mui. Ida, on the other hand, says that he was holding back because she is adorable. He then uses a single attack to blow her away. As Takeshi uses his powers, Ogami follows suit. They keep fighting until Ogami's shield fractures. Takeshi's sword, with Mui's assistance, channels both her and his magic to burst through Ogami's barrier and knock him down. Takeshi hurries home, having no idea where Isoshima is, only to find Geku and his blade soaked with their mother's blood. Geku summons Twilight, which manifests bound in chains. It assaults Takeshi and easily knocks him down, but Geku calls it off before it can finish him off. He explains that the automobile accident that injured his leg was organized by their mother in order to get rid of him, albeit she never told him why. As Takeshi finally admits that his brother is no longer alive, they both activate their spells and begin fighting in the skies. Takeshi can now react to his targeted position before Geku teleports. Just as the fight begins to favor Takeshi, it is cut short by an all-out brawl between Wizard Brace and the trailers, with all sides represented. The siblings' fight continues. Geku suddenly stops and seems to be perplexed by a change of heart. Geku moves to stab Takeshi as he foolishly lets down his guard to save his brother, but Isoshima protects him with her body. Takeshi is enraged by this, and he finally snaps and fights with a murderous purpose. When they struggle, he knocks Geku to the ground, and as they continue to fight, they both lose control due to their rage. Momoka appears and casts a spell that engulfs the battlefield. Kazuma visits Hiliako and calls her as his mother. Takeshi awakens from a dream in which he encounters a younger version of his mother. He also discovers younger versions of Washizu, Momoka, Kazuma, and, most surprisingly, his own brother Geku. This brings the anime to the end. Thanks for watching and don't forget the video and subscribe to my channel.